Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying my videos, please click the like button. It is the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. I would be very grateful to you. The Flesh Alchemists, a chemist's twisted obsession. Scary story, published by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Dr. Thomas Blackwood had always been a man haunted by his past. It was a shadow that clung to him like a malevolent spirit, whispering dark secrets and dredging up long-buried memories. But despite the darkness that lurked within him, he was a brilliant chemist, renowned in academic circles for his groundbreaking research and innovative experiments. On a cold, moonless night, the rain lashed against the windows of Dr. Blackwood's dimly lit laboratory, casting eerie shadows upon the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of chemicals and decay, as he worked tirelessly amidst the flickering light of his experiments, his mind consumed by thoughts of the forbidden knowledge that lay within his grasp. And then, like a beacon in the darkness, he found it a weathered tome hidden amongst a pile of forgotten relics. Its leather-bound cover was stained with age and grime, the title barely legible in the dim light. The Lost Alchemy of the Ancients. Dr. Blackwood's heart quickened as he reached out to touch the book, his fingers trembling with anticipation. He had heard whispers of such texts, rumored to contain the secrets of immortality and the elixir of life. But he had never dared to believe that such things could be real. With a sense of trepidation, he opened the book, the pages crackling with age as he turned them. The text was written in a language long forgotten, its words twisted and distorted by time. But as he read, he felt a fear down his soul, a feeling of unease that seemed to emanate from the very pages themselves. The manuscript detailed ancient alchemical rituals and arcane formulas, promising to unlock the mysteries of the universe itself. But as Dr. Blackwood delved deeper into its secrets, he began to sense a darkness lurking beneath the surface, a malevolent presence that seemed to coil around him like a serpent. The words seemed to dance before his eyes, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that mocked him from the page. And yet, despite the creeping sense of dread, Dr. Blackwood could not tear himself away. The promise of power and knowledge was too intoxicating. As he read on, the shadows in the laboratory seemed to grow darker, the air thick with the scent of blood and decay. And in the distance, he thought he heard the faint sound of whispering, a chorus of voices that seemed to speak to him from beyond the grave. With a trembling hand, Dr. Blackwood closed the book and tucked it safely under his arm. He had made his discovery, and now he would stop at nothing to unlock its secrets. But little did he know the horrors that awaited him, the dark forces that lurked within the pages of the ancient tome, waiting to ensnare him in their twisted embrace. And so, with a flicker of excitement mingled with fear in his heart, he set out into the night, ready to embark on a journey that would lead him down a path from which there could be no return. Chapter 2. The Experiment. Dr. Thomas Blackwood stood before his laboratory bench, the ancient alchemical manuscript laid out before him like a roadmap to madness. His hands trembled with anticipation as he prepared to embark on his first experiment, a daring fusion of modern chemistry and forbidden alchemy. The air crackled with electricity as he ignited the Bunsen burner, the flames casting flickering shadows upon the walls of the dimly lit laboratory. With a steady hand, he measured out the ingredients for his concoction, each one carefully selected for its mystical properties and potent alchemical energies. As he worked, Dr. Blackwood could feel the weight of centuries of knowledge bearing down upon him, the secrets of the ancients whispering in his ear like a siren's song. He knew that he was treading on dangerous ground, playing with forces beyond his comprehension. But he could not turn back now, not when he was so close to unlocking the secrets of immortality itself. With a sense of grim determination, he poured the final ingredient into the crucible, watching as the liquid bubbled and hissed, like molten lava. And then, with a flick of his wrist, he ignited the mixture, unleashing a blinding burst of light that filled the room with an otherworldly glow. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still, the air thick with anticipation, as Dr. Blackwood waited with bated breath for the results of his experiment. And then, with a deafening roar, the crucible exploded, sending shards of glass flying in all directions. Dr. Blackwood staggered back, his lab coat singed and smoking as he surveyed the wreckage before him. What had gone wrong? He had followed the instructions to the letter, had he not? But as he looked closer, he realized the horrifying truth. The experiment had indeed succeeded, but not in the way he had hoped. For before him lay a grotesque abomination, a twisted mass of flesh and bone that writhed and squirmed upon the laboratory floor. Horror and revulsion flooded Dr. Blackwood's senses as he gazed upon the monstrous creation before him. This was not the result he had anticipated. This was an abomination, a perversion of nature itself. And yet, despite the failure of his experiment, Dr. Blackwood found himself consumed by a strange sense of exhilaration, a twisted thrill that coursed through his veins like wildfire. For even in failure, he had glimpsed the true power of alchemy, the power to reshape reality itself. With a grim smile, he vowed to perfect his methods to unlock the secrets of immortality and transcend the limitations of mortal flesh. For Dr. Thomas Blackwood was a man possessed, a man driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge and power. And nothing, not even the horrors he had unleashed, would stand in his way. Chapter 3: The Sacrifice. The once pristine laboratory of Dr. Thomas Blackwood had become a chamber of horrors, a place where the boundaries between science and madness blurred into a twisted tapestry of pain and suffering. The air was thick with the stench of decay, the walls stained with the blood of those who had dared to venture into its depths. Dr. Blackwood stood amidst the chaos, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity as he gazed upon his latest creation, a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and bone that writhed and convulsed upon the operating table. It had once been a man, a hapless victim, lured to the laboratory under false pretenses, but now it was little more than a twisted abomination, a plaything for Dr. Blackwood's perverse experiments. With a sense of detached curiosity, Dr. Blackwood approached the creature, his hands trembling with anticipation as he reached out to touch its mangled form. The flesh was hot to the touch, pulsating with an otherworldly energy that sent shivers down his body. It was a sight that would have driven lesser men to madness, but for Dr. Blackwood, it was a testament to his genius, a triumph of science over nature itself. But even as he reveled in his creation, a nagging sense of unease gnawed at the edges of his mind. He knew that what he was doing was wrong, that he was playing with forces beyond his control. And yet, he could not stop, not when he was so close to achieving his ultimate goal. And so, with a grim determination, he pressed on, luring unsuspecting victims to his laboratory under the guise of scientific research. They came willingly, drawn by the promise of fame and fortune, unaware of the horrors that awaited them within. The experiments were brutal and unforgiving, each one more twisted than the last. Dr. Blackwood subjected his victims to excruciating pain and torment, pushing the boundaries of science and morality in his quest for immortality. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Dr. Blackwood's descent into madness became more evident with each passing day. He became increasingly detached from reality, lost in a haze of obsession and delusion. His once sharp mind was now clouded by paranoia and suspicion, his every thought consumed by the fear of discovery. He could hear the whispers of his victims echoing in the darkness, their tortured screams haunting his dreams. And yet, despite the horrors he had unleashed, Dr. Blackwood could not bring himself to stop, for he had tasted power, the sweet intoxication of absolute control, and he would let nothing stand in his way. And so, with a heart blackened by madness and a soul twisted by ambition, Dr. Thomas Blackwood continued his descent into the abyss, a man consumed by his own twisted desires. And in the darkness of his laboratory, the screams of his victims echoed into the night, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked within. Chapter 4. The Consequences. The once peaceful town of Ravenswood was shrouded in darkness, a pall of fear and uncertainty hanging heavy in the air. Whispers of strange occurrences and mysterious disappearances had begun to spread like wildfire, casting a shadow of suspicion upon the enigmatic figure of Dr. Thomas Blackwood. It started with a few whispered stories of travelers vanishing without a trace, their bodies never to be found. But as the weeks turned into months, the disappearances became more frequent, more brazen, until it seemed as though no one was safe from the clutches of whatever unseen horror lurked within the depths of Dr. Blackwood's laboratory. The townspeople were gripped by fear, their once tight-knit community torn apart by suspicion and paranoia. They spoke in hushed tones, casting wary glances at their neighbors as they passed by on the streets, wondering who among them could be next. And at the center of it all stood Dr. Thomas Blackwood, a figure of both fascination and fear. His once respected reputation as a brilliant chemist had been tarnished by the shadow of suspicion that now loomed over him, casting doubt upon his every word and deed. But Dr. Blackwood remained undeterred, his obsession with immortality driving him ever onward in his quest for power. He moved through the town like a shadow, his presence a constant reminder of the darkness that had descended upon Ravenswood. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Dr. Blackwood seemed to revel in the chaos he had wrought. He continued his experiments unabated, heedless of the consequences, his laboratory a hive of activity, as he worked tirelessly to unlock the secrets of the universe. But as the disappearances continued, and the rumors grew more outlandish, a sense of dread settled over the town like a suffocating blanket. The once bustling streets grew eerily silent, the air thick with the palpable sense of fear that seemed to permeate every corner of Ravenswood. And in the darkness of his laboratory, Dr. Blackwood smiled a cold, calculating smile that sent shivers down the body of all who beheld it. For he knew that he was on the brink of something truly remarkable, that soon he would unlock the secrets of immortality and become a god among men. But little did he know that his actions had set into motion a chain of events that would bring about his downfall, a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of Ravenswood to its core. And as the darkness closed in around him, Dr. Thomas Blackwood could only watch in horror as the consequences of his actions finally caught up with him. Chapter 5. The Visitor. The arrival of the stranger in Ravenswood sent ripples of unease through the already tense town. Clad in dark robes that seemed to swallow the light, he moved with an otherworldly grace, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of reality. Dr. Thomas Blackwood watched from the window of his laboratory as the stranger approached, a sense of foreboding settling over him like a shroud. He had heard whispers of such visitors, dark entities, that sought to prey upon the souls of men, tempting them with promises of power and immortality. And yet, despite the warnings of the townspeople, Dr. Blackwood felt an inexplicable pull towards the stranger, a curiosity that burned like a flame in the depths of his soul. He knew that he should turn the stranger away, that he should heed the warnings of those who knew better, but he could not resist the allure of what lay beyond. With a sense of trepidation, Dr. Blackwood opened the door to his laboratory, the creaking hinges echoing through the dimly lit room. The stranger's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light as he stepped inside, his presence filling the space with an aura of malevolence. "Dr. Blackwood," the stranger said, his voice smooth as silk and cold as ice. "I have come seeking knowledge that only you can provide." Dr. Blackwood scared at the sound of the stranger's voice, his instinct screaming at him to turn and flee, but still, he remained rooted to the spot, unable to tear his eyes away from the enigmatic figure before him. "What is it that you seek?" Dr. Blackwood asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fascination. The stranger smiled a twisted, knowing smile that shivered Dr. Blackwood's soul. "I seek the same thing as you, Dr. Blackwood: power, immortality, the secrets of the universe itself. And I believe that together we can achieve great things." Dr. Blackwood felt a surge of excitement at the stranger's words, his curiosity overcoming his better judgment. He knew that he should be wary, that he should not trust this dark figure who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, but still, he found himself drawn to the promise of what lay beyond. And so, with a sense of reckless abandon, Dr. Blackwood welcomed the stranger into his laboratory, unaware of the horrors that awaited him. For little did he know that the stranger was not what he seemed, that he was a demonic entity, a creature of darkness and despair, sent to tempt Dr. Blackwood with promises of power and immortality in exchange for his soul. As the door to the laboratory closed behind them, sealing Dr. Blackwood's fate, the stranger's eyes gleamed with a malevolent light, his lips curling into a wicked smile. For he knew that soon, Dr. Blackwood would be a pawn in a game of darkness and death that had been millennia in the making. And as the shadows closed in around them, the stage was set for a battle that would decide the fate of Ravenswood and all who dwelled within. Chapter 6: The Revelation. The laboratory was shrouded in darkness as Dr. Thomas Blackwood stood face to face with the mysterious stranger who had revealed himself to be a demonic entity of unspeakable power. Fear gnawed at Dr. Blackwood's insides as he realized the true nature of the creature before him. You're not human," Dr. Blackwood stammered, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and horror. The demonic entity chuckled darkly, its voice echoing through the dimly lit room like a death knell. "No, Dr. Blackwood, I am not. I'm something far older, far darker than anything you could ever imagine." As the truth of the situation began to sink in, Dr. Blackwood felt a cold dread settle over him, like a suffocating blanket. He had been deceived, manipulated by dark forces beyond his comprehension, and now he stood on the brink of damnation. "But why?" Dr. Blackwood whispered, his mind reeling with the enormity of what he had unwittingly unleashed. The demonic entity's eyes gleamed with malice as it spoke, its voice dripping with venomous intent. "Because, Dr. Blackwood, you are but a pawn in a much larger game, a game that has been played since the dawn of time itself. And now, it is time for you to pay the price for your folly." With a wave of its hand, the demonic entity conjured forth images of the horrors that Dr. Blackwood had unleashed upon the world, grotesque abominations twisted and contorted by his experiments, their anguished cries echoing through the darkness. Dr. Blackwood recoiled in horror as he beheld the true extent of his sins, the weight of his actions bearing down upon him like a mountain. He had thought himself a master of science, a visionary on the cutting edge of discovery, but now he realized that he was nothing more than a fool, a puppet dancing to the whims of forces far beyond his control. And yet, even as despair threatened to consume him, a flicker of determination ignited within Dr. Blackwood's heart. He may have been deceived, manipulated, and betrayed. With a steely resolve, Dr. Blackwood squared his shoulders and faced the demonic entity head-on, his eyes burning with a newfound sense of purpose. He may have unleashed horrors upon the world, But now, he would do everything in his power to set things right, to confront the darkness he had unleashed and put an end to it once and for all. For Dr. Thomas Blackwood was a man possessed not by the pursuit of power or immortality, but by a desire for redemption. And as he stood on the precipice of damnation, he knew that the battle ahead would be his greatest challenge, yet a test of his strength, his courage, and his humanity. But he would not falter, not when the fate of the world hung in the balance. Chapter 7. The Escape. The air in the laboratory grew heavy with the stench of fear as Dr. Thomas Blackwood realized the true extent of his predicament. He had been deceived, ensnared by a demonic entity that sought to claim his soul for its own nefarious purposes. Panic clawed at his chest as he frantically searched for a way to escape, but the walls of his own laboratory seemed to close in around him like a vice, trapping him in a prison of his own making. With a sense of desperation, Dr. Blackwood dashed to the door, his heart pounding in his chest like a drumbeat of impending doom. But to his horror, he found it sealed shut, the heavy oak barricaded from the outside world, as though to prevent any hope of escape. "No," Dr. Blackwood whispered, his voice barely more than a terrified whimper. "This can't be happening." But even as he spoke the words, he could feel the malevolent presence of the demonic entity closing in around him, its dark aura suffocating him like a thick fog. With every passing moment, he could feel his strength ebbing away, his resolve crumbling beneath the weight of his own fear and desperation. And then, as though in response to his silent plea, the laboratory seemed to come alive around him, a cacophony of creaking floorboards and rattling glassware that echoed through the darkness like a symphony of madness. Dr. Blackwood staggered back, his eyes wide with terror as he realized that he was not alone, that the very walls themselves were closing in around him, threatening to crush him beneath their weight. With a primal scream of terror, Dr. Blackwood dashed across the laboratory, his footsteps echoing through the empty room like thunder as he searched desperately for some means of escape. But no matter where he turned, he found only dead ends and locked doors, each one a grim reminder of his own impending doom. But even as despair threatened to consume him, a flicker of determination ignited within Dr. Blackwood's heart. He may have been trapped, ensnared by forces beyond his control, but he would not go down without a fight. With a steely resolve, he squared his shoulders and faced the darkness, head on, his mind racing with thoughts of escape and survival. And then, as though in response to his silent plea, a voice whispered in the darkness, a voice of hope and salvation that seemed to cut through the suffocating fog like a ray of sunlight piercing the clouds. "Dr. Blackwood," the voice said, its tone calm and reassuring. "You may be trapped, but you are not alone. Together, we can find a way to outwit this demon and escape its clutches." Dr. Blackwood's heart soared with newfound hope as he realized that he was not alone, that there were others who stood beside him, ready to fight for their freedom. With a renewed sense of determination, he faced the darkness head-on, his mind clear and focused as he prepared to confront the horrors that lay ahead. For Dr. Thomas Blackwood knew that the battle for his soul had only just begun, and that the true test of his strength and courage was yet to come. But he would not falter, not when the fate of his very soul hung in the balance. And with that thought burning bright in his heart, he prepared to face whatever horrors awaited him in the darkness. Chapter 8. The Showdown. Darkness hung heavy in the laboratory, the air thick with tension as Dr. Thomas Blackwood stood face to face with the demonic entity that had ensnared him in its sinister web. The time for reckoning had come, and Dr. Blackwood knew that he was the only one who could put an end to the terror that had consumed his life. With a steely resolve, Dr. Blackwood squared his shoulders and met the gaze of the demonic entity, his eyes burning with determination. He had spent his life mastering the art of alchemy, and now he would use that knowledge to fight back against the darkness that threatened to consume him. In a swift motion, Dr. Blackwood reached for the ancient tome that lay upon his laboratory bench, its pages crackling with arcane energy. With a whispered incantation, he called forth the powers of alchemy, weaving a protective barrier around himself as the demonic entity advanced. The laboratory became a battleground, dark energies crackling through the air as reality itself began to unravel. Dr. Blackwood's heart pounded in his chest as he faced off against the creature before him, each move calculated, each action deliberate. But as the battle raged on, Dr. Blackwood knew that he was fighting a losing battle. The demonic entity was relentless, its power far beyond anything he had ever encountered. And with each passing moment, Dr. Blackwood felt his strength waning, his resolve slipping away. With a desperate cry, Dr. Blackwood unleashed a torrent of alchemical energy, sending the creature reeling backwards. But it was not enough. The demon laughed, a sound that chilled Dr. Blackwood to the bone, as it advanced once more, its eyes gleaming with malice. Realization dawned on Dr. Blackwood in that moment. He knew what he had to do. With a sense of grim determination, he made his final move, a move that would seal his fate and the fate of the demon once and for all. In a desperate gamble, Dr. Blackwood reached deep within himself, tapping into the darkest recesses of his soul. With a surge of power that seemed to shake the very foundations of the laboratory, he unleashed a wave of alchemical energy unlike anything the world had ever seen. The demon shrieked in agony as the energy engulfed it, its form twisting and contorting as it struggled to maintain its hold on reality. And then, with a deafening roar, it was gone, consumed by the very darkness it had sought to unleash. But Dr. Blackwood knew that his victory had come at a price. As the energy dissipated and the laboratory fell silent once more, he felt his strength waning, his body growing weaker with each passing moment. With a final, weary sigh, Dr. Thomas Blackwood collapsed to the ground, his vision fading as darkness closed in around him. But as he slipped into unconsciousness, he knew that he had done what he had set out to do, that he had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious. For Dr. Blackwood had sacrificed himself to destroy the demon once and for all, a hero in the eyes of those who would come after him, a beacon of light in a world consumed by darkness. And though his name would be forgotten, his legacy would live on, a testament to the power of the human spirit and the triumph of good over evil. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. The town of Ravenswood lay shrouded in silence, the echoes of its recent turmoil still reverberating through the streets like a ghostly lament. The once bustling town had been transformed into a shadow of its former self, its people left to pick up the pieces in the wake of the devastation that had been wrought upon them. With the demon defeated and Dr. Thomas Blackwood's laboratory reduced to rubble, the survivors emerged from their hiding places, their faces drawn and weary from the horrors they had witnessed. They gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones as they tried to make sense of the chaos that had engulfed their lives. Try as they might, the townspeople could not erase the memories of the nightmares they had endured, the screams of the victims, the twisted abominations that had stalked the streets, the sense of fear and despair that had hung heavy in the air like a suffocating blanket. And amidst the rubble of his laboratory, Dr. Blackwood's legacy loomed large, a grim reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the consequences of playing God. His name, once revered in academic circles, was now spoken in whispers, tainted by the darkness that had consumed him. The survivors struggled to come to terms with the loss of their loved ones, their grief mingling with anger and confusion. They wondered how someone like Dr. Blackwood could have fallen so far, how he could have become ensnared in the web of his own twisted obsession. But as they sifted through the wreckage of his laboratory, they found no answers, only more questions, more mysteries waiting to be unraveled. And though they knew that they would never truly understand what had driven Dr. Blackwood to such madness, they vowed to learn from his mistakes to ensure that his legacy would serve as a cautionary tale for generations to come. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, life slowly returned to normal in Ravenswood. The scars of the past remained, etched into the very fabric of the town, but the people refused to let the darkness consume them. They rebuilt their homes, tended to their fields, and sought solace in the simple pleasures of everyday life. And though they knew that they would never forget the horrors they had endured, they also knew that they were stronger for having faced them together. And so, as the sun set on Ravenswood and the shadows lengthened once more, the townspeople gathered in the town square, their faces turned towards the future with hope and determination. For though they had been tested by fire and darkness, they had emerged from the ashes stronger than ever before, their spirits unbroken, their resolve unwavering. And as they stood together, united in their determination to rebuild and move forward, they knew that they would never forget the lessons they had learned, the lessons of Dr. Thomas Blackwood and the dangers of playing God. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the light that shone from within, the light of hope, of resilience, of the human spirit. Chapter 10. In the aftermath of Dr. Thomas Blackwood's demise, the town of Ravenswood was left grappling with the ghosts of its past, the echoes of horrors that lingered like a shadow over its streets. Despite the passing of time, whispers of Dr. Blackwood's experiments continued to haunt the town, casting a pall of unease over its residents. The laboratory where Dr. Blackwood had conducted his twisted experiments remained abandoned, a grim monument to the darkness that had once consumed its creator. The once bustling building now stood silent and empty, its windows shattered and its doors hanging off their hinges like the jaws of a beast. But despite its dilapidated state, the laboratory held a morbid fascination for some, the curious and the daring who sought to unravel the mysteries that lay within its walls. They whispered tales of strange lights and eerie noises emanating from within, of shadowy figures glimpsed through the broken windows in the dead of night. And yet, for most of the townspeople, the laboratory was a place of dread, a reminder of the horrors that had torn their community apart. They avoided it like the plague, casting wary glances in its direction as they passed by on the streets, their hearts heavy with the weight of the past. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a sense of determination, a resolve to never forget the lessons learned from Dr. Blackwood's downfall. The townspeople banded together, vowing to honor the memory of those who had been lost and to ensure that the darkness would never again take hold of their community. They held vigils in the town square, lighting candles and saying prayers for the souls of the departed. They erected a memorial to the victims, a solemn reminder of the cost of unchecked ambition and the dangers of playing God. And as the years passed, and the wounds of the past began to heal, the memory of Dr. Thomas Blackwood lived on, a cautionary tale passed down from generation to generation. His name became synonymous with folly and madness, a warning to all who dared to tread the path of hubris. But amidst the darkness, there was also light, a beacon of hope that shone through the shadows, guiding the people of Ravenswood towards a brighter future. For though they had been tested by fire and darkness, they had emerged stronger than ever before, their spirits unbroken, their resolve unwavering. And so, as the sun set on Ravenswood and the stars twinkled overhead, the town stood as a testament to the power of the human spirit, to overcome even the darkest of days and to emerge victorious in the face of adversity. And though the memory of Dr. Thomas Blackwood would forever haunt its streets, the people of Ravenswood knew that they would never forget the lessons learned from his downfall. That in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the light that shone from within. Chapter 11. The Return. Years had passed since the fall of Dr. Thomas Blackwood and the horrors that had befallen the town of Ravenswood. The laboratory where he had conducted his twisted experiments stood abandoned, a decaying relic of a dark chapter in history. But time had a way of erasing memories, and for many, the horrors of the past had faded into obscurity. It was on a crisp autumn day that a group of curious explorers stumbled upon the laboratory, their footsteps echoing through the overgrown weeds and tangled underbrush that surrounded the crumbling building. They had heard whispers of its dark past, tales of mad scientists and unholy experiments, but to them it was nothing more than a curiosity, a relic of a bygone era. As they stepped through the broken doorway and into the dimly lit interior of the laboratory, a sense of unease settled over them like a shroud. The air was thick with dust and decay, the walls lined with rows of rusted equipment and shattered glassware. But despite the eerie atmosphere, the explorers pressed on, their curiosity outweighing their apprehension. They ventured deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the laboratory, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they searched for signs of the experiments that had once taken place within its walls. And then, just as they were about to turn back, they stumbled upon it, a hidden chamber concealed behind a crumbling wall. With a sense of trepidation, they entered the chamber, their hearts pounding in their chests as they beheld the horrors that lay within. For within the chamber, they found a series of strange symbols etched into the walls, their meaning lost to time. And as they examined them, they unwittingly awakened a malevolent presence that had lain dormant for years, a presence that hungered for the souls of the living. With a deafening roar, the laboratory came to life around them, the walls pulsating with dark energy as the very fabric of reality began to unravel. The explorers screamed in terror as they were ensnared in a nightmare from which there may be no escape, their minds consumed by visions of unspeakable horrors. But even as the darkness closed in around them, one of the explorers, a young woman with eyes that burned with determination, refused to give up hope. With a defiant cry, she reached deep within herself, tapping into a power that she never knew she possessed. And in that moment, the tide of battle turned. With a surge of energy, she unleashed a torrent of light that banished the darkness and sent the malevolent presence reeling backwards. The laboratory shook with the force of their struggle, the very foundations of the building threatening to collapse around them. But despite the chaos, the young woman stood firm, her resolve unbroken. With one final push, she banished the darkness from the laboratory once and for all, sealing away the malevolent presence that had threatened to consume them all. As the dust settled and the echoes of their ordeal faded into silence, the explorers emerged from the laboratory, their bodies battered and bruised, but their spirits unbroken. And though they would carry the scars of their ordeal for the rest of their lives, they knew that they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and the human spirit. Chapter 12. The Endgame. The survivors stood on the precipice of doom, their hearts heavy with the weight of their ordeal as they prepared to confront the horrors of Dr. Blackwood's legacy head-on. They knew that their lives hung in the balance, that the fate of the town rested upon their shoulders, and yet they refused to back down in the face of overwhelming darkness. With courage and determination, they delved deeper into the secrets of the laboratory, their footsteps echoing through the corridors as they searched for a way to banish the evil that lurked within. They uncovered hidden passageways and long-forgotten chambers each one holding clues to the dark past of Dr. Blackwood and the malevolent forces that he had unleashed upon the world. As they pressed on, their resolve hardened with each new revelation, their determination to put an end to the terror that had plagued their lives, giving them strength in the face of adversity. They knew that they were outnumbered, outmatched, but they refused to give up hope, not when the lives of their friends and loved ones hung in the balance. And then, just when all seemed lost, they stumbled upon it, a hidden chamber concealed deep within the bowels of the laboratory. Within its walls lay the key to their salvation, a relic of untold power that had the potential to banish the darkness once and for all. With a sense of grim determination, the survivors set about preparing for the final showdown. They armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find, their hands trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation as they braced themselves for the battle to come. And then, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows lengthened once more, the forces of darkness descended upon them, a horde of twisted abominations and malevolent spirits hell-bent on claiming their soul. But the survivors stood firm, their spirits unbroken as they faced off against their enemies in a final showdown between good and evil. With weapons drawn and hearts filled with courage, they fought with everything they had, their determination to protect their town and its people giving them strength beyond measure. As the battle raged on, the laboratory shook with the force of their struggle, its very foundations threatening to crumble beneath the weight of their conflict. But still, the survivors pressed on, their resolve unyielding as they fought tooth and nail against the forces of darkness. And then, in a blinding flash of light, the relic was unleashed, a beacon of hope in the darkness, its power surging forth to banish the evil once and for all. With a deafening roar, the forces of darkness were driven back, their twisted forms writhing and contorting as they were consumed by the light. And as the dust settled and the echoes of their battle faded into silence, the survivors emerged victorious, a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and the indomitable human spirit. The town of Ravenswood was saved, its people free from the grip of darkness that had threatened to consume them all. But though the battle may have been won, the scars of their ordeal would linger for years to come, a reminder of the price of unchecked ambition and the dangers of playing God. And yet, amidst the darkness, there was also light, a beacon of hope that shone through the shadows, guiding the survivors towards a brighter future. For though they had faced the very depths of despair, they had emerged stronger than ever before, their spirits unbroken, their resolve unwavering. And as they stood together, united in their triumph over darkness, they knew that they would never forget the lessons they had learned, the lessons of Dr. Thomas Blackwood and the dangers of his twisted obsession. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the light that shone from within, the light of hope, of resilience, of the human spirit. And though their journey had been fraught with peril, they knew that as long as they stood together, they would always prevail.